Welcome to another episode of Big Barnaby's Book Club. I will be reading chapter 16 from Donald S. Passman, All You Need to Know About the Music Business, Publishing Companies and Major Income Sources. Publishing Overview. Now that you're a maven on copyrights, understanding publishing is pretty simple, and it works like this. What does a publisher do? As a songwriter, you may be interested in business, but your talents are best spent in creating. However, someone needs to take care of business, and that's where the publishing industry came from. A publisher makes the following speech to a songwriter: "Sit down, kid. Nice shirt. You got great taste." The publisher leans forward, rattling the gold chains on his neck. "You're a smart guy, so you get this right away. Your strength is writing songs, and mine is taking care of business. So let's make the following deal. You assign the copyright in your songs to me, and I'll get people to use the songs. Then I give them licenses, make sure they pay up, and we split the dough. Simple, huh? Now sign this perfectly standard agreement. Want a cigar?" Administration. Okay, so I'm being a smart aleck, but these principles are the basis of the publishing business. The rights the publisher just described: finding users, issuing licenses, collecting money, and paying the writer are known as administration rights. When a publisher makes a publishing deal with a songwriter, it takes on the obligation to do all these things and thus administers the compositions. In exchange, the writer signs over the copyright to the publisher, though, as we'll discuss later, it's now less common for writers to give up 100% of their copyrights or to give them up forever. The flow of rights looks like this. And here we have a diagram of a songwriter creates the song, sends it to the publisher, which then gets licensed to song users, and it gets split into three outlets: streaming and radio, film, TV, and commercials, and downloads, CD, and vinyl. Figure 8. Publishing industry structure. Traditionally, the publisher split all income 50-50 with the writer, with the exception of performance monies and sometimes sheet music, which we'll discuss later. Though publishers today take much less, as we'll discuss, the publisher's piece is for its overhead, office staff, etc., and profit. The share of money kept by the publisher from each dollar is known by a sophisticated industry term, the publisher's share. The balance is just and imaginatively called the writer's share. Let's screenshot these. I think I'll just show it to you. Figure 9. Publisher's share and writer's share. Publishers from the beginning of the universe until now. Following the turn of the 20th century and well into the 1940s, publishers were the most powerful people in the music industry. Ever heard of Tin Pan Alley? That's where the publishers' offices were located. In the early days, most singers didn't write songs, so they and the record companies were at the mercy of the publishers, who controlled the major songwriters. Remember, no one can use a song for the first time without the publisher's permission. See page 2616. So, the publishers decided which artist was blessed with the right to record a major new work. Because of the publisher's power and connections to the labels and artists, it was difficult, if not impossible, for songwriters to exploit the works without a major publisher behind them. Publishers today are still major players, but their role has changed radically. At one end are creative publishers, in the sense that they put out their writers together with other writers, help them fine tune their skills, pitch their songs to artists, etc. If the writer is also an artist, they use their clout to help find them a record deal. At the other end are publishers, who are basically banking operations. They compute how much they expect to earn from a given deal, they pay a portion of it to get the rights. From these guys, you can't expect much more than a bet against your future income, and of course, there's a rainbow in between. While all of this is important at the beginning of the middle stages of your career, many of the major writers make very skinny deals with publishers. In other words, they're They use a publisher to handle the backroom chores of issuing licenses and collecting money, while the writer keeps ownership of their copyrights and the bulk of the money. We'll discuss those deals on page 277. This is because once a writer is well known, he or she can get to artists as easily as a publisher can, and maybe easier. Artists often call important writers directly, looking for material, or the writer may be a major producer, and the artists they produce are always looking for songs. Also, more and more artists are writing their own songs, so there's no need for a publisher to get songs to them. All they really need is someone to make sure they get paid everything they're owed. Mechanics of publishing. A publishing company has a lot fewer moving parts than a record company. To be a publisher, you only need the following, and some of these functions can be performed by the same person. Number one, an administrator to take care of registering copyrights and the songs, issuing issuing licenses, collecting money, paying writers and co-publishers, etc. Number two, a song plugger who runs around and convinces people to use their songs, in particular for films, TV, and commercials. Number three, a creative staff person who finds writers, works with them to improve their skills, pairs them up creatively with co-writers, etc. If the publishing company only owns an existing catalog of songs, in other words, it has no writers currently under contract to deliver new songs, you don't even need this person. Thus, unlike the record business, it only takes a small investment to call yourself a publisher. You don't need a large staff until you get to be huge. Though, as the digital world gets more complex, it takes a sophisticated system to keep track of the billions of tiny transactions that generate money these days. So while it's not quite as simple as it used to be, publishers are still much smaller than record companies. Types of publishers. For this reason, there are a lot of players in publishing biz, and it isn't nearly so dominated by the majors as it is in the record business. There are, to be sure, megaton publishing companies who have worldwide operations and generate hundreds of millions of dollars per year. But there are busloads of others running the gamut from a one person show to the giants. Here's a broad strokes view of the different types. The 900-pound gorillas. There are the major companies such as Universal Music, Sony, ATV, EMI, and Warner Chappell, all of whom are affiliated with record companies. There are also slightly lighter weight 500-pound gorillas such as Cobalt and BMG Rights. Major affiliates. There are a number of independent publishing companies with full staffs of professionals whose administration is handled by a major. The publisher's affiliation with a major may be for the world, or it may be for only certain territories. For instance, a publisher might be affiliated with a major for the United States and have separate deals with other publishers for the rest of the world. Standalones. Standalone isn't an industry term. I'm using it to mean a company that's not affiliated with a major and instead does its own administration. In other words, it collects its own money, does its own accounting, etc. It usually licenses territories outside the US to a major, though it can have offices in certain territories. Just because the publishing game has a low entry price doesn't mean it's an easy gig. The difference between a good publisher and an unqualified one can mean a lot to your pocketbook. For example, a good publisher knows how much to charge for various licenses and where to look for hidden monies. For example, see page 258, discussing how foreign monies get lost when they're not properly claimed. The bad ones can lose money just by sitting there and not doing what they're supposed to. An inexperienced publisher that's affiliated with a major publisher is a quantum improvement over an unqualified publisher trying to go it alone. However, the major will not have the same incentive to take care of the independent songs as it will to take care of its own. Also, a major may administer millions of copyrights so you can get shoved to the back of the shelf. On the other hand, a good independent publisher affiliated with a major can often do better for you than if you sign to the major directly. If the indie publisher has enough clout to become a squeaky wheel on your behalf, and remember, the squeaking is on behalf of themselves as well, it can prevent you from getting lost in the shuffle. Sources of income. As noted, writers get a percentage of the publisher's income, so let's first take a look at the monies a publisher collects. Then we'll discuss how you can get the most of it under your publishing deal. We've already talked a little about mechanicals, which is the third largest source of income. Coming in at number one are public performance monies with sync. At number two, what the hell does that mean? Public performance royalties. Remember, when we discuss copyright, that one of your exclusive rights is the right to perform your composition in public. These rights are known as performing rights or public performance rights. Every time someone performs your song publicly, they need your permission. That includes playing it on the radio, streaming it on a mobile device, performing it on television, in nightclubs and amusement parks, at live concerts, etc. So, does that mean every radio station, nightclub, etc. in the country, of which there are thousands, has to get a separate license for every song they play, of which there are also thousands, and that every publisher has to issue thousands of licenses to each individual user? The paperwork alone would send them off to buy that trout farm in Idaho. Well, rest easy. This is taken care of by something called a blanket license, which is issued by a performing rights society. Here's how it works. Performing rights societies. In the US, the major performing rights societies, also called PROs, meaning performing rights organizations, are ASCAP, standing for American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers; BMI, Broadcast Music Incorporated; CSAC, which originally stood for Society of European Stage Authors and Composers but now stands for CSAC; and GMR, which stands for Global Music Rights. Of the four, ASCAP and BMI are far the largest, as CSAC has only about 10% of the US performing rights. GMR has even less than CSAC, though they have a lot of major writers. ASCAP and BMI are nonprofit, meaning they collect money, pay their expenses, and distribute everything else to the writers and publishers. CSAC and GMR are for profit, meaning they keep a chunk of the money in excess of expenses, as they say they are able to pay higher rates than ASCAP and BMI for reasons we'll discuss later. However, you can only join CSAC and GMR if they invite you, which means their members are established writers, and which also means you'll be joining ASCAP or BMI in the beginning. Virtually every foreign country has an equivalent PRO for its own territory. Unlike the US, there's generally only one per territory, and most of those are government sanctions, such as SACIM for France, GMA for Germany, PRS for the United Kingdom, etc. The PROs go to each publisher and say, "Please give us the right to license performing rights and all your songs." We'll then go to the people who want to use them, radio stations, TV stations, concert halls, nightclubs, etc., and make a deal that lets them use all the songs of all the publishers we represent. For each license, we'll collect the fees, divide them up, and send you a share. So, publishers sign up with, known as affiliating with, a PRO. If the publisher has a lot of writers, they affiliate with all the PROs. These societies then issue licenses to the users, collect the monies, and pay the publishers. Got it? Blanket licenses. The license that the performing rights societies give each other is called a blanket license because it blankets, covers all the compositions they represent. In other words, in exchange for a fee, the user gets the right to perform all compositions controlled by all the publishers affiliated by that society. The yearly fee can range from a few $100s for a small nightclub to multi-millions of dollars for television networks. Separate writer affiliation. It isn't just publishers who affiliate with these societies. The writers also sign on, and even more important, the writers are paid 50% of the money the writers share directly by the society. In other words, the writer's performance earnings are not paid to the publisher, they're sent to the writer. This is designed to protect the writer, which it does nicely, from flaky publishers who might steal their money. By the way, writers can only affiliate with one society at a time in the US. Most of the other territories only have one, so it's not much of an issue there. Historically, writers had only one society for the world, but there's a recent trend for writers with a lot of international success to divide the world. For example, they might affiliate with ASCAP or BMI in America and PRS, the Pro, in the UK for the rest of the world. Allocation and license proceeds. So here are the societies sitting with squillions of dollars from their licenses. How do they know how much to pay each publisher and writer? First, the monies are used to pay the operating expenses of the society. At ASCAP and BMI, everything left over is divided among the participants. At TSAC and GMR, they keep a profit before they distribute. But how, you ask? Do the societies know who to pay? Who knows how many times your songs were played in Pennsylvania nightclubs, baseball stadiums, dinner theaters, Chuck E. Cheese? Historically, the distributions were all based on radio and TV airplay, then extrapolated for everything else. But in the digital age, the data pool is far more detailed and complicated, so they can more accurately allocate the money. If you're really into 50 Shades of Performance Allocation, both BMI and ASCAP have details of their calculations on their websites, so go on over and spank yourself to your heart's content. Generally, here's how it works. Number one, radio. Both ASCAP and BMI use media monitoring companies to scour radio stations across the nation 24/7. They believe they cover about 85% of all the licensed stations, and from that, they extrapolate the 15%. Television. Number two, television stations are required to keep cue sheets, which are a list of every musical composition broadcast, how long it was played, and how it was used, theme song, background performed, visually, etc. The cue sheets are then filled with the societies. There are specific dollar amounts for each type of use, theme, background, etc. The amount also varies with the size of the broadcast area. Local stations pay a lot less than networks, and the size of the program's audience. Both ASCAP and BMI supplement the Q Sheets data by digitally monitoring broadcasts, and they also use independent statistics to verify the data. Number three, streaming. One of the advantages of digital delivery is that the service providers have precise data of what's being played, how often, and to how many people. The disadvantage is that they overwhelm the societies with megatons of data that some poor schlump has to sort out. Number four, live events. The societies pay based on domestic concert performances, but it's only for the top 300 grossing tourists as reported in a magazine called Polestar. The PROs distribute money based on set lists, list of the songs played on the tour, which they get from either the venues or the artist management. PROs say they also track sports stadiums and arenas to pick up the songs that everyone claps along to. If you're performing in coffee houses and small venues, these aren't tracked separately, but both BMI and ASCAP have programs for you to submit your materials and get paid something. Number five, background music. The fine music you find in airports, grocery stores, and waiting rooms is also logged separately. In addition to a share of income determined by the above, BMI and ASCAP both pay substantial bonuses to big earners from a pool of money they set aside for this purpose. I'm sorry I can't give you much guidance on how the bonuses work because A, the rules change from time to time, B, the amounts also vary by category, pop, classic, rock, classic music, didgeridoos, etc. And C, I've never actually needed to understand exactly how they work, so I have no clue. Both societies pay quarterly, 4 times per year, and both societies pay about 9 months to a year after the calendar quarter in which the monies are received. Motion picture performance monies. Due to some fancy footwork by the film industry, a number of years ago, PROs are not allowed to collect public performance monies for motion pictures shown in theaters in the United States. There is no logical reason for this. Showing movies is certainly a public performance. It's just historical and political. However, foreign territories have never bought into this nonsense, and motion picture performance monies over there are significant. The fees are collected by local societies, then paid over to your United States PRO, unless, of course, you're a direct member of the foreign society. Foreign film performance monies are a percentage of the box office receipts, which means they generate a good amount of green or whatever color the local currency is. How much? Well, the composer of a smash film score can earn hundreds of thousands of dollars in foreign performance monies alone. Which society is the best? The best gauge is to look at cross registered songs, which means a song that's registered with both ASCAP and BMI. This happens when a song is co written by an ASCAP and a BMI writer. ASCAP collects a share of the song's performance monies and pays the ASCAP writer and publisher, while BMI does the same for its writer and publisher. Since each society collects and pays independently to the other, we get to see who pays more. And the result? No clear answer. As noted above, the societies change their distribution rules on a regular basis, and the bonuses also affect the results, so the answer shifts around. For mainstream writers, I've been told they're pretty similar. They're specific genres of music, however, one tends to do one better than the other, but it changes over time because of the changes in distribution and bonus rules. So, unfortunately, I can't give you an accurate scorecard. The big picture is that It shouldn't matter much if you're an artist with a broad appeal, but if you're in a specific genre, you should join the society that will treat you more favorably. That's unfortunately one of those rules is easier said than done because the information has to be current and it's not that simple to dig it up. The people with the data are some of the bigger business managers. They can look at their clients' catalogs and compare earnings, or if you got access to a big publisher with cross-registered songs, they can give you an even better comparison because they have much more information. Otherwise, lick your index fingers, stick it in the wind, and let it blow. And know that you'll be in the position to make a better decision in a few years. When you're big enough to get access to the data, you need to make the right choice. As noted earlier, CSAC and GMR claim they pay better rates than ASCAP or BMI. The only information I have is in public, so I can't really comment, but it's certainly possible because of how they're set up. Let me explain. In the United States, ASCAP and BMI are under what's called a consent decree, which is fancy legal jargon for the fact that they're so big and scary that the government puts restrictions on what they can do. If you want a little more technical explanation, it means they consented to a legal judgment that spells out rules they have to follow. If they don't follow those rules, they're violating the United States antitrust laws. One of the one of these consent decree restrictions is that they can't refuse license to anyone. In other words, they have to let everyone perform the songs no matter what. However, they can argue about how much they should get paid for that license. If the PRO and the user can't agree on a price, they go to a judge who sets the rate. This seriously impacts the PRO's bargaining power. If they can't leverage the user by refusing to license a song, they don't have anywhere near the same clout as if they could. Enter CSAC and GMR, who are too small to be regulated by the government, which means they have no consent decrees, which means they're allowed to say, "We think your offer sucks, so you can't use our music." Accordingly, they should be able to charge more money, and even after taking out the profit, they can, in theory, pay more to the writers. The Music Modernization Act that I mentioned earlier has some goodies that make this situation a little better for ASCAP and BMI. Historically, when there's a disputed rate, it was decided by one judge, one for ASCAP and one for BMI, who was appointed for life to hear all the performance rate cases. And some people felt those judges were too tough on the PROs. In addition, when the PROs argued for a higher rate, the evidence they could submit was very limited. For example, the court couldn't consider the rates paid for sound and recordings. Under the MMA, where the PRO still can't refuse to license music, a different judge is now randomly assigned to each case. Also, the MMA allows the rate court to consider all the market evidence in determining the rate, including the rates for sound recordings. These changes should result in higher rates down the road, so stick around. We should find out in the not too distant future more about mechanical royalties. As we discussed on page 215, mechanical royalties are monies paid by a record company for the right to use a song in phono records. It's easy to see how this works for CDs and downloads. The publisher issues a license to the record company that says for each record manufactured and distributed and each digital copy that's downloaded, the record company will pay a royalty equal to a specified number of pennies, currently 9.1 cents, unless the song is over 5 minutes. Harry Fox and CMRRA, two major organizations, are delighted to issue mechanical licenses for publishers. One is the Harry Fox Agency, which is the largest organization of its kind in the US, and its Canadian counterpart, CMRRA, standing for Canadian Musical Reproduction Rights Agency. Basically, these organizations act like a publisher's agent for mechanicals. They issue mechanical licenses for the publisher, police them, make sure the users pay, and account to the publisher for their services. Harry Fox currently charges 11.5% of the monies collected, and CMRRA currently charges 6%. Fox and Canada Music periodically audit record companies on the streaming services on behalf of all their clients and then allocate the recovered monies among their clients in proportion to their earnings. This is particularly significant for a smaller publisher as the cost of an audit for low earners is prohibitive. Today, a typical publishing audit can cost $15,000 to $25,000 or more, and unless the recovery is likely to be several times this amount, it's not economical. For more info, check out their websites harryfox.com, cmrra.ca. It may surprise you to know that many mid-sized publishers and some larger publishers use Fox and CMRRA because the cost of hiring a staff to issue numerous licenses and police them is more expensive than the fees these organizations charge. Recently, however, the trend is for the larger publishers not to use Fox or CMRRA, as technology has made it easier for them to directly license the users' streamings and downloads. If I stream a song to my mobile phone, is that a performance, a mechanical, or both? What if I download a song to my phone? Is that a mechanical only, or is it also a performance? Ah, the joys of shoehorning new technologies into a copyright law that was first written when wax cylinders were the rage. Here's the debate. The PROs say that streaming a song is just like listening to it on the radio, which is clearly a performance. Plus, they say that a downloader has to be streamed to a phone or PC in order to deliver it, and that's also a performance. The Harry Fox folks who collect mechanical royalties say you can't stream music without making a copy of the DSP's computer server and caching it on a mobile phone. And those are reproductions of the song, meaning you need a mechanical license. Also, downloading a song is just like the sale of a CD, so it's clearly a mechanical right. Well, they're both sort of right, but underneath it, all this posturing was really a fight about who got paid to collect it, the PROs, the Fox people, or both. Interestingly, Europe worked this out before we did. Of course, over history, they worked out a lot of things before we did. In most of Europe, the countries agree that a download is 25% performance and 75% mechanical, while streaming is considered 75% performance and 25% mechanical. However, the United Kingdom splits 50-50 because performance and download, and in Switzerland and a handful of other countries, they don't recognize any performance right for a download. So maybe they didn't work it out so well after all. Anyway, after the predictable wrangling in the United States, everyone's come to an understanding on this issue. Here's today. Here's today's scorecard and all the all-star game of mechanical versus performance. Permanent downloads. Let's start with an easy one. Permanent downloads, like the one sold on iTunes. It's well settled that these downloads are treated just like the sale of a CD. That means you get a mechanical royalty only, and it's not a performance. Non interactive audio streaming. Non interactive means someone else decides what you hear, as opposed to you choosing the music yourself. It's essentially a radio station that's delivered via streaming to your phone and not over the air to an antenna. It's now settled that you only get performance monies from ASCAP, BMI, etc. for non-interactive streams, which is exactly what you get if an over-the-air station played your music. The rates are pretty complex, and they change over time, but in essence, they're a percentage of the revenue with minimums per stream in case the user doesn't have much revenue. For the most current state of play, you can check out the standard ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC non-interactive performance license on the websites ASCAP.com, BMI.com, and CSAC.com. Generally, it's about 5% of the revenue for all the PROs combined. Monster streaming companies, Spotify, Apple Music, and the like, don't take these standard off-the-shelf licenses in the same way that CBS television doesn't take an off-the-shelf performance license that's geared to local TV stations. Instead, the big guys negotiate their own specific deals with each PRO. For the technical freaks out there, the rest you can skip to the interactive streaming section on page 234. There's an important difference between the internet streaming and over-the-air stations. As I mentioned earlier, before you can stream on the internet, you have to make a copy of the song on your server. Two lawsuits have held that a server copy of a copyrighted song requires a license. UMG Recordings, LL versus MP3.com, Inc., 92 F sub 2nd 349 2000, and Rogers and Hammerstein Organization et al. Versus UMG Recordings Inc. and the Farm Club Online Inc. 60 US PQ2B BNA 1342 2001. Note: this server copy license is in addition to the performance license. A performance license lets you stream. The server copy license lets you make a copy. Take a look back at our discussion of the various rights and copyright on page 212. One is the right to perform, and the other is the right to duplicate. However, as industry practice, the publishers only require a performance license for non-interactive streaming. Over the air, radio stations also make server copies of recordings for broadcast. When they're allowed to do this without a license under a specific provision of the copyright law, their server copy is called an ephemeral recording under sections 112 of the Copyright Act. Technically, this only gives them the right to make a copy of the sound recording, not the song. But if they have a performance license, they're good as a matter of industry practice. Webcasters who were not over-the-air broadcasters wanted the same rights, and after some back and forth, the industry practice settled down to the same result. Non-interactive services only need a performance license. Interactive audio streaming, on-demand streaming. Now, for some complicated stuff, stay with me. This is the biggest part of the business and growing. As we discussed, interactive streaming lets you call up whatever song you want to hear whenever you want to hear it. Big players, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. As you may recall, there's a compulsory license for songs using interactive streaming. The rates for the streaming license and all other compulsory licenses, not just music, are set by the Copyright Royalty Board. Copyright Royalty Board, CRB, is made up of 3 administrative judges who probably have no sense of humor. These judges take on lots of evidence. Shockingly, record companies argue that the rate is too high, and copyright owners say it's too low, and then sit around and think about it. When they're done cogitating, they deliver the new rates for compulsory licenses. By the way, the Music Modernization Act recently changed the standard the CRB uses to set rates from a limited evidence process to a willing buyer, willing seller standard, which the music industry has wanted for years. Willing buyer, willing seller means the rate two people would agree in a free marketplace if they wanted to make a deal, and it allows the CRB to consider all the market data. In 2018, much to the dismay of the digital service providers, the CRB gave the publishers a gigantic increase over the old rates, with more bumps built into the future years. Some of the DSPs have appealed this decision, and at the time I'm writing this, it's still pending, so these rates may change, but let's take a look at where they are as I write this. I shouldn't use the word uncomplicated to describe the rulings. The rates are a set of formulas that cover A, subscription streaming services, B, subscription streaming services that are bundled with other services, which we'll discuss in the next section, C, portable services, which means you can get the music on a portable device, D, non-portable services, you can probably figure out what that is, and E, non-subscription, advertiser-supported services. Ooh, but wait, there's more. We have subcategories for the subscription services. There are rates A, for services that only play when you're connected to the internet, B, those that play both when you're connected and when you're not, and C, limited offering subscriptions, meaning subscriptions that are either non-interactive or for only a particular genre or limited playlist. Can you stand the excitement? Note, this license covers only mechanicals and not performance money, though the rates are reduced by the amounts paid by the DSP for performance money, which I'll discuss below. Also, remember, this is only for songs, not masters. There is no compulsory rate for interactive streaming of masters. We covered how those are paid on page 144. In a very simplistic form, and I use the word simplistic guardedly, the compulsory license for interactive streamers works like this. Number 1. First, you look at the rate for the applicable year. Under the CRB ruling, the rate for 2019 of the greater of A, 12.3% of the service revenues for the period involved, or B, 2.2 of something called TCC, meaning total content cost. In other words, the total amount that the service pays out for the right to make interactive streams and limited downloads of sound recordings for that period. Under the CRB ruling, the percentages in A and B will increase over the next few years as follows. 2019 to 2022 interactive streaming rates. Royalty. Year 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. Percentage of revenue. For 2019, it was 12.3. For 2020, it was 13.3% of revenue. For 2021, it was 14.2. For 2022, it was 15.1. Percentage of TCC for 2019, 23.1%. 2020 percentage of TCC 24.1, for 2021 25.2, and 2022 percentage of TCC 26.2. The rates before the songs. The rates before the 2018 CRB ruling were 10.5 for A above and 2.1 and 2.2 for B, so you can see there was a huge increase. Once you have the result of that multiplication game, you subtract the amount that the DSPs have to pay for performance license, generally a little over 5%. Let's call that the net subscription amount, a term I just made up. Number 3, we discuss per subscriber minimums, PSMs, on page 144. In the context of streaming masters, This concept is alive and well in the publishing world, thanks at least in part to the CRB's rate ruling. In other words, regardless of what the digital service actually collects, they can't pay out less than a per subscriber minimum multiplied times their total subscribers. This keeps the DSP from dropping its prices too low, or at least it costs the DSP a bigger percentage if they do. The PSM under the CRB rate ranges from 15 cents to 50 cents per subscriber per month, depending on the kind of service being licensed, assuming, of course, there are subscribers, which there wouldn't be in ad supported services. In ad supported service. In determining the number of subscribers for this calculation, they treat a family plan as 1.5 subscribers. To be clear, the PSM is not 15 cents to 50 cents per song per month. That would bankrupt the digital service provider. It's a minimum figure that the service has to pay for all the songs used, divided among all the songs and their publishers. Number 4. Okay, so now you've computed the net subscription amount under 2 and the PSM under 3. You take the higher of those two figures, let's call it the base, which is another term I just made up, then figure out your share of it. This is done by computing the percentage of your place for the period involved bears to the total place for the period, then multiplying that percentage times the base. So if you had 10% of the total plays and the base was $100,000, you'd get $10,000. But wait, there's even more. In computing your percentage of the base, you get more of the pie if your songs are longer than 5 minutes. Here's the formula. Number 1, 5 minutes and 1 to 6 minutes each play 1.2 plays. 6 minutes and 1 to 7 minutes 1.4 plays. 7 minutes and 1 second to 8 minutes each play 1.6 plays. 8 minutes and 1 second to 9 minutes 1.8 plays. 9 minutes and 1 second to 10 minutes each play 2 plays. For playing times greater than 2 minutes, then 10 minutes, continue to add a 0.2 for each additional minute of fraction thereof. Got it? If you really want to understand this in more detail, check out 37 CFR Part 385, which is published in the Federal Register, Volume 74, number 15, P29, as amended by Federal Register, Volume 74, no P6832, and further amended in 37 CFR 835B Part C. You might want to print a few copies. D, keep them next to your bed in case of insomnia. By the way, outside the United States, there are no compulsory mechanical licenses at all. Instead, in many territories, there are published tariffs set by the local societies or a government agency that everyone follows. Stuck in the middle with. What if you're sort of an interactive service? For example, you don't get to hear anything you decide to punch up at the moment, but the service lets you skip unlimited numbers of songs, replay songs, get a listing of songs before they play, hear a specific artist more than a few times each hour. Some DSPs have a mid-tier service that lets you replay songs and listen to a limited number of stations when you're not connected online. The DSPs could take a compulsory license for this, but it would be too expensive, so the deals are negotiated specifically. While the terms aren't public, I understand the rates are somewhere between a performance license rate, a little over 5%, and the above statutory rates for interactive streams. Video streaming. You may remember that there's no compulsory license for videos. That means the CRB has no jurisdiction over video streaming services like YouTube and Vivo, which means the publishers can charge whatever they want. So this area has been like the Wild West. Here's what's happening down on the ranch partner. A record company produces videos and publishers get a percentage of ad revenues and or subscription monies. The rates aren't public, but I understand it's somewhere in the 10% range. Sometimes they also get a fraction of a penny as a minimum per stream payment or a minimum per subscriber payment. For user-generated videos, the UGC we discussed on page 150, the major publishers have licenses with YouTube and Fox, represent some of the indies, but not all of them, meaning there's no central place for the YouTubes of the world to make a deal for all their music. As to rates, after some amount of wrangling, the National Music Publishers Association, NMPA, an industry organization that represents publishers in both lobbying and dealing with users, came to an agreement with YouTube, and the deal is the norm. For a while anyway, the Fox agency can do the license for you, though they act for YouTube, meaning they're not representing you. They were hired by YouTube to help them. YouTube also has an opt in license, which you can find out on his website, meaning you elect to use it opt in with a few clicks and therefore directly license your music to them. The direct license has the advantage of dealing directly with the DSP rather than have Fox in the middle. Hmm. The terms for UGC videos are: if it's a user created video that includes a commercial recording of the song, the video streaming service pays the publisher 15% of the net ad revenues. Some of the smaller streaming services actually pay the record label, which in turn pays this amount to the publisher. Number two, if it's new recording of the song like Uncle Lenny, the musical star virtuoso at Picanha in Texas, the publisher gets 50% of net ad revenues. The only exception is cases where the uploader gets some of the ad revenue. For example, if Lenny has a YouTube channel and gets a cut of ad money, in that case, YouTube deducts whatever it pays Lenny from the publisher's 50%. However, this deduction is subject to a limit of 15%, meaning the publisher never gets less than 35% of net ad revenue. While I understand that YouTube's content identification program does a good job of recognizing commercial sound recordings, I'm told it doesn't pick up live versions of UGC as well. So your publisher has to police this. Yet another example of how complicated the world is becoming and how difficult and expensive it is for publishers to make sure they get their share from the river of pennies, more accurately, fractions of pennies. Interestingly, as massive as YouTube is, this ad revenue around music, especially UGC, is pretty low. That's because the audience is so wide that it's hard to target ads. Nobody pays much to advertise tampons to a 60-year-old dude. So until this gets more efficient, this ad rates will stay low, and the money from YouTube isn't what it could be. As you can see, these models are not only complicated, but also require publishers to track usage all over the internet. And while the big publishers have sophisticated tracking systems, what about the rest of us? Well, the Fox agency offers these services, as do a number of competitors. For example, Songtrust helps songwriters and publishers track and collect their publishing income. They are located, not surprisingly, at songtrust.com. Other companies in this area are Audium.com, and adrev.net, which monetizes YouTube. Okay, just a few more paragraphs. Music Modernization Act. All right, you've now got enough background to really understand what the Music Modernization Act (MMA) is about. Well, at least most of it. There's a little more to come later. As we discussed, a compulsory license is one that a publisher has to give you, whether they want to or not, as long as you check the right boxes under the Copyright Act, and to get a compulsory mechanical license for physical or downloads. One of the one of those boxes is that your master must be the second or later recording of a song, meaning a cover record. Wow. Well, for the first time under the copyright law, the MMA created a compulsory license for the first use of a song. But A, this license is only for streaming, and B, you can only get this compulsory license if both recording and the song have been licensed for streaming, meaning you already have a voluntary license to stream the song. So, as I asked before, why would you need a compulsory if you already have a voluntary license? Well, time to answer that question. You don't need a compulsory license for streaming when you already have a voluntary license. Does that mean Congress was insane? You can take the Fifth Amendment. Well, not this time, anyways. They passed the MMA in 2018 to fix a nasty problem that existed in the streaming world. Here's the background. When streaming was an infant, Spotify and other services went into uncharted waters with their business model. They quickly discovered that they were dealing with multi-millions of songs and billions of lines of data, and that a lot of these songs had more than one owner. To put it mildly, the digital service providers, DSPs, were overwhelmed. For starters, they had no idea who owned a lot of these songs, much less where to reach them. It's simple enough to find major publishers, but they don't control all the songs. In fact, even on songs where the majors have an interest, they sometimes don't have all the rights because some of the multiple owners of the songs aren't major publishers, or because the major only controls certain territories of the world, etc. And even if the DSPs could find the owners, they weren't set up to handle tens of thousands of licenses from obscure publishers around the world. All this resulted in the DSPs having tens of millions of dollars, so they didn't know where to pay. So they did what any red blooded business person would do, they kept it. In the biz, we call these unallocated monies pending and unmatched. It didn't take the indie publishers long to wake up, and when they did, they sued the DSPs. Their lawsuits claimed that the DSPs were infringing their copyrights because they didn't have licenses to use their songs, and they were right. The DSPs didn't even know who to ask for a license. Historically, the tech business and the music biz were not the best of friends. After all, when Napster started, the techies made a lot of money selling computers, access to the internet to steal songs, CD burners, and the like. And as we discussed earlier, YouTube is still a serious problem for us. But with the DSPs heading for a crashing loss in court, they suddenly had a stake in finding a solution to this pending and unmatched problem. Meanwhile, the music publishers wanted a system that got everyone accurately paid so they didn't have to sue and wait years to get their money. In other words, we had one of those rare times when both sides were aligned in their goals, and this kumbaya moment gave birth to the MMA. With both sides pushing the bill forward, Congress didn't get any of the vicious threats it usually gets from the opposition, so the bill was passed and signed into law relatively quickly. Don't get used to that. The MMA solves the pending and unmatched problem by setting up something called the MLC, Mechanical License Collective. This new organization, which the DSPs will fund, has the authority to collect all the mechanical rights money from the DSPs. It doesn't collect performance monies; those go to the PROs. To give the MLC the right to collect all this dough, the MMA created the compulsory license we discussed. In essence, this is the blanket license where we talked about PRO blanket licenses. As long as the DSPs pay the MLC for all the streams, they can stream any song without being guilty of copyright infringement. This neatly solves the problem of DSPs not knowing who to pay and puts the dough in the hands of an independent party instead of the DSP's bank account. The MMA also allows the MLC to collect money from voluntary licenses negotiated by both sides. In other words, the major publishers can still make their own deals with the DSPs, but the MLC will collect the money centrally and pass it on. Under this system, publishers will file claims with the MLC for the songs they own, and the MLC will pay out 100% of the money it collects. As I noted earlier, the law requires the DSPs to fund the MLC, so there's no deduction of costs or commissions. But what if no one claims a particular song? That means the MLC doesn't know who to pay. What happens to the money? Well, the MLC hangs on to it for a period of time, then, if it's still in claim, pays the money to everyone who did file claims. Specifically, MLC holds unclaimed monies until January 1st of the second full calendar year after the license availability date. Then, if nobody shows up to claim it, they pay it out to the people who did claim it other songs for that period. These unclaimed monies are allocated on the basis of the market share of each publisher who claimed money. So, for example, if you had 10% of the market share in that period, you get 10% of the unclaimed money. This is very similar to black box money we'll discuss in sub publishing deals on page 259. An interesting aspect of the MMA is that it requires publishers to pay at least 50% of the unclaimed monies to the songwriters, allocated on the basis of each song's earnings. This is similar to the breakage concept we discussed in page 146. Remember, this all started because the DSPs couldn't figure out who to pay. Well, the MMA requires the MLC to set up and maintain a free, publicly available database of all the songs, publishers, and writers. This will truly be a valuable asset. If you ever try to track down a song, it's not a fun journey. So now you understand why the weird compulsory license, without it, there'd be no basis for the DSPs to pay the MLC and be absolved of copyright infringement. You can bank that in your database.